Hello and welcome to the This is Ibrox podcast. I am your host, Ross Chalmers. This is a kind of special transfer window review podcast. We're going to take a look back at all the transfer activity at Rangers this summer. So please get involved in the comments. We're going to try our best to pick out some of them. Everyone just seems to have a different opinion when it comes to transfer. So I'm really keen to see everyone get involved. And I've got two guests with me tonight to go through it. First of all, we've got Patrick Caskey. Hi, Patrick. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. It's nice to cap off a somewhat weird and wacky window with all the early action and a lack thereof late on. But I think I speak for quite a few people. I'm happy that it's over, but perhaps not in the exact circumstances. I would have liked a blaze of glory for us to go out in, but it seems to just be like a tepid march across the line.
Yeah, I kind of feel the same, to be honest. We also have David. David's stepping out from behind the curtain tonight. He keeps the podcast running usually, and he wants to get involved in this transfer show. So he must have big opinions. So David, how are you? David, I think you're muted. I think you're muted. Yeah, we'll see how we go. Yeah, but what we'll do is we'll go kind of through all the incomes and outgoings at Rangers this summer. I think it's a good opportunity for us to take stock. We'll have a good look at that. Originally, I thought we would maybe talk about the deadline day links, but what we'll probably do is talk about the lack of them and where that leaves us. We'll maybe have a wee think about areas that we probably haven't addressed. I know the opinion is quite rife on Twitter today, so it'd be good to get a good conversation about that. And maybe have a wee chat about who we maybe would like to see sold or loaned out. I know there's a split in opinion on that as well. And then if we have time, we'll have a wee look forward towards January and just get our overall thoughts on the window. So hopefully that sounds interesting for everyone. Before we start though, I thought this was a good icebreaker, right? So we'll go to David first. What is your favourite ever deadline day signing? Yeah, it was one of those signings I remember at the time looking at the fee, 50 million. You couldn't believe it. You couldn't believe it. So, and yeah, it was, and Liverpool used that money very well. I'm pretty sure they brought in Suarez for that money. So it turned out to be a good deal. Patrick, what about you? What's your favourite ever deadline day signing?
Yeah, I think the Ozil to Arsenal back in 2013 was a fun one. I think that's one of the classic Sky Sports iconographies. I also think equally one that didn't go through with Sky Sports, the Odin Wingy when he was either QPR or West Brom and he drove to one of the pitches or stadiums to try and force to move through, but it didn't end up happening. That was quite funny as well.
Yeah, I remember that one as well. The one for me sticks out is Dimitar Berbatov. It was at that time where social media wasn't as big. You didn't get Fabrizio Romano breaking everything, and I just remember Berbatov being linked with Manchester City throughout that whole window, and he just was not willing to move. And then it turned out in the last day he was pictured at Carrington, I believe. So that was my favourite ever one. I know we're getting a few comments in the stream about David's audio. David, if that's something.
Yeah, I'm hoping it's fixed now. Fire on in the comments.
Yeah, please, if everyone can let us know if you can hear David, that would be great. Thank you. We don't want him missing out. He's got a lot to say, so we definitely don't want him missing out.
Nobody wants to hear that, Ross. Nobody wants to hear that.
So I think we're still seeing no sound. Yeah, no sound. What we'll do is we'll let you try and work that out.
Yeah.
We'll get started on we'll have a wee look at the incomings for Rangers this window. I'm going to go through them in what I believe is chronological order. I'll be honest, my memory is terrible sometimes, so they might be out a wee bit. But we'll start with maybe a controversial one. John Souttar arrived. He signed a pre-contract in January. From Hearts, really good reputation in Scotland, Scottish international, looks really good in the back three for Hearts, and he's maybe had a wee bit of a difficult start for Rangers, maybe struggled to settle a wee bit. How How did you view that signing originally, Patrick? Was that something you like to see Rangers do, that kind of domestic signing?
Yeah, I think I was championing it since like October, I remember, on Twitter, just because it made a lot of sense. I understand he's injury prone, but given our ambitions to compete in UEFA competitions, we need to have a certain sort of rota of domestic players, both club trained, so Rangers youth players, and domestic trained, and to tick the box. He wasn't going to push us very far in terms of pushing the needle, but we had realized fairly early on that it was likely Balogun was going to leave, and Souttar, as so far as domestic play, replaces him not perhaps stylistically, but quality wise. They're quite similar with Souttar. Obviously, has room to grow, being just 25. Although again, he's unavailable at some extent quite often, so it limits his natural ability and tendency because availability is the best ability. But Balogun was like that as well. But yeah, I think he didn't have the best start to his Rangers career, and obviously has had to deal with some tragic off-field situations, which obviously wish him and his family the best. But yeah, I think it's a fairly simple transfer to make with no fee, low sort of risk factor, just because Scottish player need that, centre back depth need that, and no fee. Obviously, with all transfers, you have a significant signing on fee and wages, so no fee is actually zero, but that's about as close to a sensible transfer as you can pretty much get in Scotland by far.
Yeah, I very much agree with most things you've said there. I want to echo what you said there about John Souttar. Wish him all the best to his family. That was awful to hear about, so wish him all the best. David, just wanted to pick up on something that we've seen in the first few performances from John Souttar. We've seen him playing in the left of a back four during pre-season, and we've seen it at Livingston as well. He struggled a wee bit. Do you see that being John Souttar's role going forward, or do you think John Souttar is inevitably going to be Goldson's kind of backup essentially on that right-hand side? How do you view that?
So I think when we signed him initially, there was obviously a large amount of doubt about Goldson's situation. I think safe to say most of us thought he was actually going to move on. So I think there might have been an eye to that when they pulled him in. The other thing that I would mention as well, for I think Patrick touched on it already, is he came from Hearts where he was playing in a back three, and we have seen Gio kind of flicker with that here and there. So I think potentially, yes, he could be Goldson's backup, but it also gives us additional options if Gio wants to sort of go with that flexibility that he's shown and just change things up depending on the game.
Yeah, I have to say, I do agree with what you're saying there. I felt probably towards the beginning of the window, once we started seeing these signings come in, I felt we were going towards a back three. That it looked like some of the signings were going towards that. Now, we haven't seen that as of yet. We've seen it at USG away, but we all know that was a pretty poor performance that night. So
Don't remember
I'm
that.
not.
Don't remember that, Ross.
Well, yeah, I'd like to not remember that one, but I
Yeah,
do,
yeah,
unfortunately. So we'll see what comes for John Souttar. I'm sure he's got plenty of time.
yeah.
I know sometimes we are quick to rule players out at Rangers, but he's got plenty of time to settle,
Aye,
and hopefully he comes back really fresh from this injury layoff. So the next signing we had was Antonio Colak, 28, Croatian. He came from PAOK, around a 1.8 million fee. This was one that went back and forth for a couple of days. If you remember, there was conflicting reports in Scotland whether the fee had been agreed or not. When he first came in, a wee bit underwhelming originally, didn't look too great in pre-season, had a great goal scoring record previous seasons until last. And I mean, look at him now. He's absolutely flying. He's got 7 in his last 7 games. He's scored the crucial goal for the Champions League. I'm going to come to you first on this one, David. I think
thought
is
you
it
might.
fair that your opinion might have changed on Antonio Colak? How did you feel originally, and how do you feel now about the signing?
Yeah, I think it's definitely safe to say my opinion's changed. So when we were initially linked to him, I'll be honest, I wasn't up nor down. A slight worry about his goal scoring record at PAOK, but he had performed well in previous seasons in other leagues, so you've got to factor in, is there something about the league or the team that maybe didn't suit him? So I was fairly relaxed when we signed him, bought him in. I don't buy into the whole he's 28, he's too old nonsense. I mean, yes, you always want to be buying in players so that you can develop them and sell them, but you do also need a kind of sweetener of experience in there, and I think he's able to provide that while still being in his prime. I'm just going to put my hands up since you set me up so nicely. I thought he was awful actually at first. We were playing, and I know previously when players have come in, I try not to judge them too quickly, but I do always look for, even if it's just little glimpses or little flashes from them that make you think, actually, there maybe is someone in there. It's just not quite there yet. Yeah, fair play. I was not seeing it at all. To quote regular contributor Reese, I thought he was dug meat. Um, Very much changed my opinion. For fair play to the guy. I wasn't alone. There was a lot of it floating about. I think some of the fans were getting quite restless with him, to be fair. Um, didn't let it phase him at all. He's just battered on, and I think we're seeing the rewards now. And I would actually go as far as to say, at this moment in time, I would say Antonio Colak is our number one striker.
I would have to agree with you. I think it was maybe my first podcast actually, and we were talking about the Antonio Colak signing, and I felt that he was coming in to really compete with Morelos for that first team slot. And even though the fee wasn't huge, I just felt that just the profile of the player, that's what he was coming in for. Patrick, is this maybe the first time that Alfredo Morelos has had a real, competition for that number 9 slot? And evidently, it doesn't look like he's taking that too well. Is this the first time that we've got a real battle on for that striking position?
Well, yeah, I guess when you consider that dynamic is two ways. So we've seen Roof go through some very purple patches, but at that same time, you'd have also seen Morelos either actually playing football and doing so quite well. But the mix of Morelos's unavailability as well as Cholak's early form does make it a genuine and not even controversial statement in the slightest to say that Cholak is the number one right now. Obviously, that's largely due to Morelos's externals, because even though Chalk has done well,
Yeah.
I don't think anyone's going to pretend that he is better than Morelos when he's fully fit and firing. But I think he is playing to his greatest capacity. And I think his transfer, especially similar to Lawrence, given their age profile, was contingent on them hitting the ground immediately and helping us fire the Champions League and a good start in the league. And they've done the former. The latter is still up to debate. Obviously, that'll be dependent quite heavily on Saturday. But no, I do think that's probably the first time we've actually had tangible competition for the starting spot. But I think that is as much to do with Morales' ill treatment and poor performance and attitude as well as Cholak's opposite his fantastic performances. And I think more than anything, his performance has been good, but his attitude seems fantastic. He's always working hard, seems a very likable guy, and just presents himself well, which is something I think is important if you're going to sign for Rangers.
Yeah, I have to agree. I think one of the things that stuck out to me with Cholak originally was his work rate. I think what you've said there is right. It can take a wee while for to win over Rangers fans, but if you give your all on that football pitch, you've definitely got a better chance. And I felt his pressing was great. I felt it was really intelligent as well, the way he was doing it, and that really has benefited us, especially in those Champions League games. And credit to him, he's made such a great impact already. So let's hope that continues. The next signing we made was Tom Lawrence, I believe, Welsh, 28. We signed him in a free transfer from Derby. He came through the Man United academy, I believe. I was actually really excited by this signing. Probably the type of player that we've needed for a while. Maybe that kind of long-term Arfield replacement. One of Derby's best performers last year. Where do we? I'll go to you first on this one, Patrick. Where do we see Lawrence making the most impact in this team? I think we've seen him now play as a number 8 next to Lundstrom, but we have seen him one further forward as well in that 10 role. What would you say is his most effective position for us?
But before we get to that, I will just admit when the links were there and when he had signed, I wasn't impressed and I was disappointed with the signing. But as so far, I've been impressed with what he's done. So I'm very happy to, as so far, eat my words. Hopefully, the sort of rumors that have been swirling around forums and Twitter that he won't be available for upwards of 6 weeks are false. The last word that we've seen from the management staff or anyone from the club was that he was fine. But typical of Rangers these days, they're not very transparent with injury and unavailability news. But no, I don't think his position is paramount to what we success, because domestically the difference between an 8 and a 10 is splitting hairs. just because out with maybe Celtic and Aberdeen away, Hearts away, and Hibs away, and 8 will do what a 10 does mostly because we'll be in possession 70-75% of the time. But I think he's at his best when he's in and around the box. I don't think he's technically the best, although he is very brave and shows for the ball a lot, which I think, especially when you're playing for a team which is so good comparative to your competition, you don't need to be the best. You just need to show a lot because it won't be that difficult to sort of side pass the defensive and midfield lines of opposition teams. But yeah, I think the further and closer we can play him to goal and the more touches and shot creating actions he can get around the box, the better. And whether that is played as a 10 or an 8 is up for a discussion. I think he's a bit versatile in that sense, whereas I don't think the impetus is finding his best position, but rather he sitting somewhere, playing somewhere, which will allow someone else to play better. Because I think he'll put a 7 out of 10 if he plays as a 10 off the left, even up front. He'd play a bit for a derby. I think he's, as so far, just been a consistent performer. And yes, I would agree. So there's sort of a hole that we haven't filled in a while. He's not an Aribo replacement the slightest. It's more so a filling of a void that we had left for quite a while. I mean, Arfield sort of satisfies it, but not to the same extent. And all signs are good as so far. And let's hope they can continue.
Yeah, I think you're right there with the consistency of Lawrence, the versatility as well. It's great to see. I also love it when someone is honest and says how they felt originally and it's changed now. So I'd like to get your opinion as well on that, David. How did you feel originally about Tom Lawrence? He did come in with a bit of a, let's say, a dodgy reputation. How did you feel about the signing originally?
Still sound really stupid, but I think the word that sums it up is content. I wasn't excited. It wasn't something that got me off my seat thinking, oh, wow, that's a cracking signing. There is obviously the question marks, especially I think some of the Derby fans were saying around consistency. But, there is a player in there and he has played well at a decent level. And that is something that can certainly be transferred domestically. Wasn't quite sure how he would work out in Europe, to be fair, but certainly domestically, I thought, as you've alluded to, potentially, has that kind of Arfield ability to split the lines, get into the right place about him. The fact that he can play on the wings. I saw something really interesting the other day. It was Twitter, God forbid, but was someone basically saying how actually on the right we play slightly better if we don't have an out-and-out winger there because it frees Tav up to get forward more. And if with Lawrence you see him dropping in the middle a little bit more, he's not hugging the touchline so much. I think that gives Tav license to bomb forward, which certainly domestically is a must. At the right times in Europe as well, I would suggest. I can see Stephen Smith there has said similar about the right wing, so he said that's probably where he is going to play due to a lack of quality there. I think that's probably fair, and I think the way the team is at the minute with the personnel available, that is going to be the best slot for him.
Yeah, I think you've made a great point there on Lawrence, but also in that right wing role. I think I think this is why we're seeing Scott Wright play so often at the moment, because he is just someone that facilitates James Tavernier. He gets the best out of him. And I know that we get frustrated with Scott Wright in that position, but at the end of the day, if he's going to help get the best out of James Tavernier, who is one of our most important players, then it's maybe just something we have to deal with for a while. Of course, we would maybe like someone of a higher quality in that position.
Yeah.
And that brings us on to the next signing, and it's actually, you think I'd maybe planned that one. It's Rabbi Matondo, 21, Welsh, signed him from Schalke.
That lined up well.
2.7 million up front, rising to 3.5, I believe. Went for a big fee from City to Schalke, around 12 million. Had a really good season last year at Cercle Bruges. If I said that correctly. Played off the left, I believe, predominantly last year. Yeah. He's had a bit of a slow start. I'll come to you again on this one, David. What do you feel about the Matondo signing as it stands? Is there a wee bit of frustration there for you with Matondo? Are you maybe expecting a wee bit more at this stage?
I think we need to be careful with him. He's not old, he's not your sort of Lawrence or Colak that we've bought in ready to go. I think there's going to be quite a big adjustment from playing in, City's academy or overseas in what are far more technical leagues than ours. Um, I mentioned before when I was talking about Colak, and I don't know why I'm using that example because my opinion of him was clearly awful, but I tend to look for flashes, and I think every so often you see something from him and you think, yeah, there probably is a player in there. At the minute, we're not seeing it, for now. Unfortunately, at Rangers, you don't get time to kind of ease your way in gently. Usually, it does take, I think, was it yourself, Patrick, that said, or it might be you, Ross, that you've at least got to give the effort. But I think he's been signed as a more technical type player. He's not necessarily going to be charging everyone down all the time. If we can get him consistently doing the things right that he's doing, I think there's definitely a player there. The trick is we need to get him doing it, and I would say even beyond that, we need to get him doing it in Scotland. Domestically, he can do what he wants in Europe, but he is going to be judged domestically in the main, and we know what Scottish football can be like, technical, fast players, prime target for someone to hack down in the first couple of minutes to lay a marker on them, as they like to say. I think we're going to have to wait with this guy. I don't think he's going to be, we're not talking the next couple of months he's going to be flying. I think we might need to even wait a season potentially to see the best of him.
Yeah, I think you might be right there. I think the transfer fee can sometimes make people think that the player you're bringing in is maybe more established, but we do have to remember he is only 21. Something I'd like to pick on with you, Patrick, is we've seen obviously limited minutes for Matondo so far, a wee bit in and out of the side, but we did see his best performance on the left against St Johnstone. I believe he got 2 assists that day. Done really well for I think it was the second goal he done really well for. In fact, done well for the first goal as well with the tackle, I suppose, with his work rate. How do you see Matondo's role going forward? Are we going to persevere with him on that right-hand side because that's where we probably have bottom for, or is it maybe potentially he's going to go over to that left and provide competition for Kent and potentially replace him if Kent moves on? How do you view that?
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's quite difficult. I think naturally what you want in a right footer is someone who ideally, especially the way we play and we give width to having someone who's left footed. That's probably like the number one on the sort of list of priorities we want for a right winger, and then obviously wants to score goals and dribble and do it all. But I think the fact that Matondo had played a bit at right wing the year prior, although more so at left wing as you mentioned, and even I think he spent more higher minute share last year at striker than he did at right wing even. And we've had that void. Even I guess Candace was good for a while, and I really liked him. But even before that, there's just been this sort of urban legend that we can't sign a right winger at Rangers, and I mean, it's proven again this summer that the idea that someone who's even played 15-20% of their career on the right wing is going to come in and immediately fill that void. And the heart grows fond of what it doesn't have, and we haven't had one for so long. So people are immediately expecting us to plug in a right winger who spent not an outstanding fee on, but something that's above rotational, and that we would immediately have this symmetrical attacking threat, and it'd be Kent 2.0. Whereas I don't think for that price range you can get Kent 2.0. There's some really good options in that range, some more established than Matondo, but with Matondo you're sort of buying, it's a trade-off, you're buying potential more so than immediacy, which I don't know is perhaps the best dynamic we need, especially at right wing. If we were signing like a sub centre back, we could then have the patience and sort of trade off. Or even if we were to sign another striker tonight, I know quite a few wanted to, or perhaps then you could perhaps trade off potential. But I do think Matondo has something. He's really good at communicating touches into scoring opportunities, whether that be assisting or shooting. But yeah, I think the idea that Sakala is still in house kind of confuses me because I think they're similar in the state that they both can play on left and right wing. They can play up top with a partner. I guess there's the pretty basic connection that they're both quick as well, but I don't think they play very similar at all. I know some people like to say that, but I just think that's a poor quiff, or quip rather. But I think Matondo, I agree with Dave. Definitely, he's not a player for the next 2 or 3 months. I do think, I know it's so hard, especially at Rangers, to afford any patience to players because every season's the biggest season, and we now have Champions League this year. But I do think he has the key skills when you break him down to be successful. Though I don't think perhaps immediately he's going to hit the ground running because he thrives off open games, running, which you're not going to get domestically. I think we might see some decent performances in Europe. Then we also have to recalibrate our expectations in Europe because in Europa League we would expect to win games and top a group, whereas I don't know exactly what constitutes a good individual performance against Liverpool away. There's like holding our own. There's not looking like a third-rate player constitute a good performance. So I think it's going to be interesting and confusing time because I think perhaps more so than any time in the last few years, maybe going back to 2019-20, I think people's expectations for both on a personnel and a collective level are so there's such a sort of mixed painting of it, and there's so many different ideas and what people expect that there's a
Yeah.
lack of conjoined thinking, which is fine because we are such an interesting. Tonight you'll see 1,000 opinions on 1,000 different things. So I think people's expectations are different. I think Matondo perhaps emblemizes that the most. Some people already wanted to give up on him, whereas I think you should probably give him some time. He's 21. He's like a year older than me, and I couldn't imagine stepping out and playing football in a local park, let alone Ibrox.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you're right there. I think we just need to give Rabbi Matondo time. He needs to have time to settle. He needs to really understand what Van Bronckhorst is looking for him, and I'm confident he'll come through this. He's had a bit of a slow start, but I'm sure he'll be fine. We'll move on to another young player now. Slightly different outlook on this one. Malik Tillman, American, 20, signed from Bayern Munich on loan. We have an exclusive option to buy, I believe. He moved to Bayern when he was young from Greuther Fürth, I believe. Made a handful of Bayern first team appearances. He really has adapted really quickly and really well to Scottish football. And in fact, his performances in Europe have been fantastic as well. I'll stick with you on this one, Patrick. How did you feel about the transfer originally? Did you have any knowledge of Malik Tillman? Is he a player you were aware of?
Nah, not until the sort of rumors popped up. I remember sort of filtering his data and it was outstanding, but then I had to consider obviously it's a much higher level compared to our B team, but he was playing for Bayern's B team in the Zweite or the Bundesliga in Germany, which is better than obviously the Lowland League, but you had to consider that he was in between the first team and the second team, and he done really well in the second team, but had failed to break into the first team, which is no indictment on him as a player. Because if you're anywhere below the age of 22 and even threatening to get into the Bayern first team, you have obvious quality. But yeah, he wasn't someone I was aware of. When the name popped up, I hadn't heard it. I talked to some of my mutual friends who follow Bayern, and they were all excited for me, which was a good indication. And yeah, he's exceeded all expectations I had personally. I think there was obviously the discussion, just I think it was on a temporal basis because Aribo had just left and he was the midfielder we had brought in after, whether he replaced Aribo. But again, I don't think he does. Really, I think he's more in that sort of Lawrence mold, albeit a bit more technically sound and dynamic. But yeah, I think he's done really well so far, and I think what we're seeing is performances and an adaptation, most importantly, beyond his age because albeit he plays for the US men's national team, he's a German national. He speaks German. He's lived in Germany his entire life. So this isn't like a guy who's lived in the States, knows English super well, would immediately have a buddy in James Sands. This is a guy who's moving out of Germany for the first time and is obviously fluent in English, but it's not his first language. It's not his mother tongue. So I think his adaptation has been fantastic. I do think we've seen that there is a lack of fitness in his legs because I think he begins to tire at 60 minutes, which is expected for a guy who really hasn't played prolonged senior men's football over a season of more than 2 or 3 months ever. So we're seeing that. And if I could ask for one thing, I would like him to be a bit more clinical in front of goal. Albeit he's got a few goals so far, but I do think that it's not even when he's shooting that he's not getting them on target. There are some opportunities where if we had a more clinical player, we'd be getting a shot off. But that's literally nitpicking because so far he's exceeded all expectations. And I think I know it's incredibly early. It's like a month. I mean, the transfer is not even shut, but he, to me, as so far, is looking like the best signing.
Yeah, it's funny you say that with the nitpicking on Malik Tillman. I'm quite like that with him as well. Now, I don't know why. It's maybe because he's adapted so quickly and I've been so impressed. I feel sometimes he's a wee bit naive. Maybe sometimes he should be trying to win a foul or play a pass, and instead he decides to take on a man one-on-one and seems to lose the ball. But I just think he's just used to that kind of youth football where it doesn't really matter. So that's something I think that will come with experience. David, I'll come to you on this. How impressed have you been with him? And is it inevitable that we are going to take that option to buy on him?
So, yes, very impressed. To answer your question, I think there is question marks over the overall fitness at the minute. As we said, that is to be expected given the kind of level that he has been playing at. I'll be honest, I think he's going to smash it for us. My worry is the rumour that Bayern, yes, we have an exclusive to buy him, but they have an exclusive option to buy him back from us. So yeah, we can make a profit, potentially enjoy a good player for a year, but based on what I've seen so far, I'd actually like him to stay for a couple of seasons. I think he's very good. Yeah, decision making at times could do a bit of work, but again, he's a young lad, and I think we've seen with Gio he can bring players on, so I've every confidence that he'll be working with that, especially Voss as well in the training pitch. I think we can iron out those little niggles, and I think that he could be a cracking player for a few years, and we could potentially sell him on for a fairly good fee down the line as well, I would suggest.
Yeah, I think so. I think the boy has everything to go all the way to the top, to be
Yeah,
honest with you. I think that that buyback clause that Bayern have,
yeah,
usually when it comes to a buyback clause, it's usually 3 or 4 times what you've paid. So if that is the case, Rangers are going to make a good profit out of it. And like you said, they're going to get a good player for a few years. I
yeah.
can see that Stephen Smith has said in the comments that he's a level above anyone else on the pitch. And
Aye.
that was the way I felt when he came on at Livingston that day in the first game of the season. I was whoa, who is this boy? He
Aye.
just looked so comfortable. He's playing on an
Didn't look
AstroTurf
phased
pitch.
at all, did he?
Yeah, it's not easy sometimes to come on that environment, and he
Mhm.
just absolutely strolled it and really got us through that game. Let's be
Aye.
honest, he was the difference maker that day. So the next thing we brought in was Ben Davies, I believe, English 27 from Liverpool, around a 3 million fee. I think add-ons take it to around 4 million. Rated quite highly at Preston, and then Liverpool signed him a couple of seasons ago when they were going through that real injury crisis. Maybe a bit too big of a jump for him, and he's not
Yeah.
really seen any minutes. I'll stay with you on this one then, David. For the fee involved, originally, what did you make of that fee? It was quite a sizable fee for us. Is it likely that he is going to be Connor Goldson's partner going forward? Do you think that is the long term for Ben Davies?
I would imagine that's the intention. Again, as I say, I think Souttar was bought more with half an eye on Goldson heading out the door. I think he is left-sided, so it makes much more sense than kind of forcing a square peg into a round hole. Um, the money realistically isn't that much. To us, it is, but in the grand scheme of things, I mean, we paid 3 million for Goldson, and given his medical history prior to us signing him, you could argue that was maybe a bit of a risk. So, 4 million for an established player, it's not the worst. I think it's. I'm not saying you are, but I think it's actually really unfair to rate him on his time at Liverpool. I think you nailed it when you said that was a jump too far. We all know that he was supposedly going to them. As you say, Liverpool had this big injury crisis, stepped in and he signed. To be honest, it's one of the top teams in the EPL. It must have been hard for him to say no. Didn't work out, but I think he showed enough in his time at Preston to say that he will actually work out quite well for us. I know start-wise he's again a bit dicey and it's a bit fragmented with his injury, but once he gets past that, I reckon he will come good, and I reckon, yeah, he probably will be our first choice left centre back at that point.
Yeah, I think there's not a lot of panic right now when it comes to Ben Davies because of how well James Sands has played in
Yeah,
that role right now.
yeah,
But I think you've seen against Ross County at the weekend that the physicality aspect maybe James Sands lacks, and it's maybe something that Ben Davies will give us over time, although he is known for being a great ball progressor from the back. So we'll see on that one. What did you make of the Ben Davies transfer, Patrick? Was he one of those signings where you maybe thought, oh, does this look like we're going to a 3? What did you make of it?
I mean, I think saying I was disappointed is a bit unfair. I thought it was incredibly safe. I think the fact that it was in conjunction and quite literally hours after Bassi was sold, I thought he suits the profile of what we need. He's a good ball progressor, quite safe passer, duels offensively and defensively, quite poor in the air, but that's fine. Bassi wasn't great in the air, and Goldson's quite good in that respect. And there's tactical functions to sort of usurp sort of personal deficiencies. And although we haven't really seen it much because there's been a lot of discussion and discourse on our inability to sort of maintain a zone defense and how it's sort of not bear fruits, and we conceded quite a few corners so far. But no, I understand the transfer 100%. Like fits the profile. Left-footed is incredibly important, and a left-footed ball player even more so because we had Helander who was left-footed, but his left-footedness was almost cut off by the fact that he wasn't that comfortable in possession. So this should allow us to open the pitch up a bit more. I do think James Hans has been fantastic so far, and the longer he stays in the starting lineup, whether that be at the foot of defence or the foot of midfield, the better. I really like him, and I look forward to us hopefully exercising our buy clause on him. But no, I did think if there was a point where we could push the boat out and sign a sort of not a project player, but someone who would arrive with first team quality, but be 22, and we spend whether that be the 4 million euros we spent on Ben Davies or somewhere closer to five, that would have been ideal and the time to do so. Just because we already had Souttar who's 26, we have Goldson who's 30. But then I do understand that we have Little King in the pipeline and James Sands. But yeah, it was safe. And I remember reading someone wrote it and it was quite good. It was a signing for where we are currently, but I wanted a signing for where we want to be, someone who with potential to move. But no, I think he'll do well. I think he addresses the immediate voids, but I think if we work as we have done on this sort of 18-month rolling timeline, come the end of the 23-24 season, hopefully we're too good for him. Whereas I would have liked to see someone who with potential to grow alongside us. But yeah, not one I'm going to complain about at all.
I think that's a perfect way to put it. Actually, it's quite similar to how I felt originally when the news was breaking. I did feel it was quite safe, and because it was quite safe, I was quite disappointed with the fee that we were spending. I think you've made a great point there. I think it is someone we probably will look to outgrow eventually. But of course, we need him on the pitch first to outgrow him and try and get the best out of him. I'm going to stay with you on this one, Patrick. I'm going to speak about Ridvan Yilmaz now. Turkish 21, bought him from Besiktas around, I think it was around £3.5 million, rising to £4.5 million. Those fees have been quoted differently everywhere, I believe, when it comes to Yilmaz. Really highly rated young fullback throughout Europe. I was actually quite surprised we were able to make this deal, but that's maybe me being pessimistic of where we are. Did this deal surprise you? I'm sure I read one of your scouting reports a couple of months ago, and you had mentioned Ridvan Yilmaz. Did this surprise you that Rangers were able to see this one through?
Yeah, it caught me off guard. I watch a lot of Turkish football. It's sort of the league. I probably watch more Turkish football than Scottish football. But obviously, so it's the league I sort of specialize in. I get paid to write about it quite a lot from other outlets. So I think I have some sort of authority to talk about it. And I've been watching him since when he broke out in October 2020, and I've always been really impressed. And I thought, so he was linked with Frankfurt 2 months before in the early window, and that was about to happen. But then Besiktas had pulled out due to the sort of financing of the deal in terms of the structure of the payments. It was a similar fee to what we paid, around 5 million euros or whatever, but they had wanted to do it over a longer payment period, and Besiktas had pulled out, but then we were able to do so. What I like about Turkey is that they're very financially transparent. CAP, which is their sort of legislative and executive, will publish the transfer fees. So if you want to go and find the exact fee, you will be able to go and find that in some press release on Besiktas's website. But yeah, I really liked it. Obviously, I think not maybe concerning because Barca just played quite well, and Yilmaz speaks no English. I remember reaching out to a few of my friends in Istanbul. I have a friend who's very close to people who work at Besiktas, and he told me, yeah, he speaks no English at all. And as someone as myself who's moved around, gone to places and where I don't speak the local language, it is quite difficult to assimilate immediately. So this guy's 21, he's coming to Glasgow for the first time. I do understand the sort of reservations to throw him in, but I do think against Colak, it was fine. I thought some people overreacted, but I thought he was just like sort of content, 6 out of 10 performance. Against Queen of the South, he showed his real quality. And yeah, I think this is what the sort of transfers I like to see because he has significant upwards potential. If everything goes right, he'll be here for another 24 months. He'll perform well. He'll help us win a trophy, maybe get progress in Europe, and then he will leave to the Bundesliga or the Premier League. And I'm happy with that transfer. The sooner he's integrated into the team, the better. Although that's at the behest of the coaching staff who work with him every day. But I think Perhaps obviously Celtic and Ajax will be too early for him, but I think we should be aiming for him to be integrated. I mean, as soon as possible. I'd like to see him starting consistently, perhaps in the next 2 weeks after that next international break.
Yeah, I'd have to say I'm the same on that one. I'd like to see him integrated a wee bit more. I was slightly disappointed he didn't play against Ross County, but I understand that we were maybe keeping him for the Queen of the South, so I understand that. I just wanted to pick up on something you've said there regarding, you know, it does take a wee bit of time to settle. I think we've spoke about this with Matondo as well. You know, the language is something that we probably don't take into consideration sometimes, and it really is difficult. So we have to give these guys time. Unfortunately, at Rangers, and especially with the fee spent, sometimes you don't get it from a lot of the fans, but I'd like to hope that most will give them the time. How do you feel on it, David? Have you been impressed with what you've seen so far? It has been limited, but have you seen something in there that makes you believe that we've got a real gem there?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, as Patrick said, first game, nothing really to write home about. It's not necessarily that he did anything wrong. It's just he didn't do anything that made you stop and go, "Wow, that was impressive." Yes, it was Queen of the South, but his assist was a thing of beauty. It was really good, and I think just to come back to your point on kind of language, culture, all this kind of stuff, I think we have to be patient with him. This guy's an investment. And it's like what Patrick was talking about when we discussed the Ben Davies transfer. This is the sort of player that will grow with the team. He has got a far higher ceiling than where he's at right now. I don't expect to keep him forever, unfortunately. He's not going to be like Tavernier. But I do think, again, we should see a fairly substantial profit on him, as well as getting a few really good seasons out of him. We're just going to have that patience to start with. We've all had that feeling where we've gone somewhere and felt a bit lost. He is experiencing that 24/7 at the minute. He won't know people here. He will struggle to communicate with them without a translator. It's going to be a tough few months for him. I would hope the club have gotten sort of an English teacher in to try and work on that. I would also hope that there's some support there for him settling into the city. But the biggest kind of support that any of us can give him is just going to be giving him that time. And I think as well, when being a young guy, we're going to have to forgive a few mistakes. I think he probably is going to make mistakes along the way. You'll get your moments of brilliance, but you'll also get your, oh my God, what are you doing type moments. We're going to have to bear with, because I think he's a cracking player, and I think actually it's a toss-up between him and Tillman as to who excites me more. Tillman has obviously hit the ground running, so it's very easy to say, well, this guy's something else. I think we're going to feel the same way about Yilmaz once he is in and adapted and ready to go properly.
Yeah, I have to agree. I think you seen the other night as well, those kind of underlapping runs he was making is something he was well known for at Besiktas, I believe. Yeah. And I think he started to really gain confidence the other night. And it sounds silly, but that piece of skill that he has, that sticks in fans' mind, and that will ultimately buy him some more time. It was a fantastic bit of play. He picks his head up and he picks out Scott Arfield for a goal. These things will stick in fans' mind, and that will help him. So he grabbed the opportunity the other night, and again, I am sure this boy will come good. We just have to give him time. What we'll do is that's obviously all our incomings. That was an interesting chat. I enjoyed that. Let's have a wee look at the outgoings. I'll maybe pick a few out here because obviously quite a lot of players have left and we'll be here till probably 1 a.m. if we go through them all. What we'll do is I will pick out the kind of the higher profile ones, and then I'll maybe judge where we are, because I'm keen to get your thoughts on kind of deadline day and things like that. So we'll go for Joe Aribo first to Southampton. This was the kind of first outgoing of the window, I believe, other than kind of release players, or you knew that players were being released. A 6 million fee rising to 10. Managed to get a sell-on fee in there, I believe that's what we negotiated for. A really fantastic player for Rangers. 148 appearances, 26 goals, 25 assists. He was only bought for 250,000 in a cross-border deal. And, we'll all remember him for that Europa League final goal that he scored. Of course, it didn't end the way that we wanted, but everyone will remember that moment. I certainly will, being in that stadium. It was unbelievable. I'll come to you on this one, Patrick. Did you feel that this was the right time to see Joe Aribo move? Did you think this was a deal that made sense for all parties? I think you're muted.
It's not me this time.
Yeah, no, it's me, it's me. I think our hand was pushed just the dynamics of the contract. He had 12 months left, and we needed to guarantee getting money in from someone because we had a trio of players whose contracts or big players, who have several. I think it's 9 players with contracts expiring next year, but 3 big hitters, 2 still left unaddressed. So I think just something that will be the next point of discussion after the transfer window closes. But yeah, I don't think it was the perfect deal because I think some people, as you look back to January, would have thought, oh, 10 million, no way, that's a snip. But he had a release clause. I think people need to remember that this was his original deal that he signed from Charlton on. So the idea in which he would have a 25 million pound release clause inserted to a guy we signed for 250k is a bit ambitious. In hindsight, that would have been great. But even then, our position of bargaining wasn't strong for a multitude of reasons. One, Aribo's contract, obviously, this was our last sort of juncture in which we could profit at all because in January he could sign a pre-contract and then we could negotiate a fee for him to sign for half a season and get like 2 or 3 million. But
It'd be a token
it,
fee, wouldn't it?
yeah, nothing. So like I
Yeah.
remember we could have got John Souttar for like 600k in January, whereas they would have wanted 3 million in the summer prior. So you really knocked down that price. Two, I mean, it was kind of natural. We were always expecting someone to leave. And this was when the Bassi discussion had gone quiet. So the idea in which we were just getting some sort of influx of money was positive. But he also wanted to go. He grew up in England. He's an English, dual national English Nigerian. So his dream was always to play in the Premier League. I don't ever want to think for a second his dream was to play for Southampton. Particularly, they're a nice club. I have nothing against them, but it's more the idea of the league, and we see that the sort of monopoly it has on world football now, and it's just natural for us to sort of see the magnetic charm of it take effect on our players. So no disrespect to him on that. He left very amicably, nothing wrong, and he performed throughout his last season and throughout his entire tenure. I think it was a bit frustrating at times, but he was probably my favorite player since we've got back in the Premiership. So sad to see him go, but I've watched all the Southampton games so far, so they've got at least one more viewer because we both playing there. Happy to see him score. Hopefully he plays well this season and we can make the most and maximize that 15 or whatever percent release clause or not release clause, sell on clause we've got on him.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think I said at the site at the time it was a deal that suited all parties, and I still believe that. I can see Stephen Smith in the chat saying good enough deal for the club, but a steal for Southampton, and I absolutely believe that it is a steal for Southampton. They've got an absolutely fantastic player, and I agree with you, Patrick. I've watched all his games so far, and he just looks great. He looks like he's absolutely thriving down there. I'm going to change the topic of conversation here, David. I'm going to switch to Calvin Bassey for you. You're going to talk about Calvin Bassey. So moved to Ajax, record fee for the club.
Yep.
I think it works out about £19.7 million up front, rising to about 23.5, I believe. My conversion might be out a wee bit. You know, again, bought in a cross-border deal. I think it was maybe 300,000. We've seen such remarkable improvement from Bassey in the second half of last season. You think of those performances against Sparta Prague and St Mirren the season before. It looked like he had a long way to go. Was the Calvin Bassey as sad as it was to see, because we loved him, we loved his energy, we loved his drive? Was the Calvin Bassey deal just a deal that we had to do? Was it just a deal that once the money was there, we'd had to take that? There was no other option.
Yes. So I think there's a few things in there. I mean, firstly, the player wasn't agitating for a move. He made that very clear, and I think that was reflected in his dealings with the club. Again, like we said about Aribo, he went quite amicably. I think on that basis, realistically, in Scotland, I mean, we've heard the board talking about the player trading model. It's a nice phrase, and what it suggests is quite important for us. I think that is how we function. Up until that point, we'd sold Nathan Patterson for decent money, and then obviously Aribo had gone, but that was a significantly smaller fee for a variety of reasons. I think that is how we survived. We didn't know we were getting Champions League. We hoped, absolutely, but you can't run a business on that basis. I think same for the Europa League. Yes, we'd taken the money in, but you can't bank on that every season. We massively overperformed to get to the Europa League final, so I think to just bank on that would be craziness. The only other real alternative we have, someone friendly in the comments. Yeah, I think we had to. Realistically, it's our only income stream of any significant value outside of European competition, which you cannot rely on. So we have to get used to the idea that we are going to buy these players, we're going to develop them. As fans, we're probably going to fall in love with them, and then they're going to up and go elsewhere. Um, Perhaps a little bit surprised that he went to Ajax. No, absolutely no disrespect to Ajax. Slightly more technical league, but I suppose it's probably more about his development than it is just the money in this case. I think, if he'd wanted money, he could have stayed with us for another season, half season, probably got an EPL move to someone, again, a Southampton, who very easily could have paid the same money as what Ajax did for him. The fact that he's gone there suggests that it is in part at least down to the football as well as the money. So that's probably quite nice, but at the same time, I think we just had to be honest, and I think we're going to have to get used to that because it is going to happen more and more. I think Tillman and Yilmaz, they're obvious examples. We're going to pay a decent sum for them, but the theory being we will sell them a couple of seasons down the line for far more.
Yeah, you're right there. I think it's something that we do need to get used to. Unfortunately, it's just where we are in the market. We can't dictate that. We're going to have to sell our best players when other teams come calling. Unfortunately, I'm conscious of the time, so I definitely want to get your views on everything that's happened with deadline day and where the areas we probably need to address. I'll maybe just run through. Obviously, some of the other outgoings. Leon Balogun was released. He's recently joined QPR. Cedric Deacon moved on. He went to Young Boys for around 1.5 million. We've seen Niko Katic move today to FC Zurich. That's a sad one, I'm sure, for all the fans. There's a big list of players that have actually left during this window. Now,
I think they had to.
I'm not going to
go.
I won't. I won't go through them all because I'll be here all night. What I will say, I'll ask you this one, David. There is a lot of frustration at the moment with the board. We probably feel like we could have done more, especially in these last few days of the window after qualifying for the Champions League. Do you think the board have done well this window, though, moving on players, like fringe players that aren't required? We have seen the likes of Niko Katic, Glenn Middleton, Jack Simpson, Stephen Kelly, all of these players that really didn't have a future at Rangers and that have been on the books for a while now. Have the board done well to move these guys on and get them other clubs?
Yeah, so I mean, there's two aspects to it, isn't there? So there's one, the financial kind of input that we receive from moving these guys on. You've got to imagine in most cases that will be reasonably negligible. There might be a couple where we've got a million or two, but we're certainly not talking big fees. More importantly, though, is I think we've freed up some wage. Obviously, there's the new requirements coming through European football at the minute, so we have to be cognizant of them. We have to watch. We can't afford just to have these players that, as you quite rightly said, just has been obvious for a while, they don't have a future here. We can't just have them hanging around. It's bad for morale. It's bad for the wage bill and obviously the follow-on financial impacts that might have. So, yeah, I think good business to move them on. Potentially, I'm sure we're going to come to it, but I don't think that's the only thing that needed done this season. So, yeah, I'll leave it there and let you ask your question next.
No, that was good. I think sometimes we need to be honest and we need to try and give the board credit where it's due. And they can be called out on a lot, but I think they have done well this window. It's something that Rangers fans have cried out for a long time to move these guys on, and we've been able to do that. So, Patrick, I'm going to come to you on this one. You're going to get your opportunity here to really give your strong opinion on deadline day and how you feel. I'll give a wee bit of context. It was around 3:30 today that Sky Sports News were reporting that Rangers had concluded their transfer business, and I think that surprised most people on Twitter. Of course, I don't think anyone had a real confidence that Rangers were going to do anything, but that was very early on in the day, and transfer business was ruled out. How do you feel about the lack of activity? Not necessarily just today, but since we've qualified for the Champions League, do you feel that we've not really made the most of the kind of Europa League run last year and the Champions League qualification? If we've not pushed the boat out maybe in the way that we should have, how do you feel?
I don't know. I think obviously we've been absorbing substantial losses for near on 5 or 6 years. I think this will be the first April 21 to 22 will be the first time we post a profit in years, albeit it should be a significant one, hopefully. Or actually, it'll be a decent one, but the coming financial year will be a significant one because that's when we'll get the Champions League and Bassi money in there. But yeah, I mean, I had expected if we'd lost to PSV, I would have had no qualms for us not recruiting anyone else because you would have got 5 million in compensation for going down to the Europa League. But then again, it'd been like, okay, well here we haven't moved the needle compared to what we did last year. I don't think we can complain. But I think it was just the idea that there must have been some contingency plans, some targets that would have been like, okay, if we get Champions League money and an influx of capital and a significant one, albeit it's spread out over sort of a dynamic of winning games, TV money, and all that. So I don't know exactly when it's paid. I think we get some upfront and some is paid upon the completion of the group stage in each game. But it's the guarantee of money. It's not like, oh, if we win this game, we'll get the money. It's a guarantee, albeit the payment might be spread over the entire of the autumn into the winter. And I think that was a bit disappointing because there was the sort of availability of both funds. It appeared, at least looking outside in. I don't want to pretend like I have any authority on the actual financial state of the club. I know some people like to pretend to do, but it appears at least that we are. I think it's not controversial to say we're in the best financial health we've been in a while. Whether that it's actually a good financial health, broadly speaking, in the landscape of football clubs can differ. But no, I thought there was both the obvious need for holes to be filled. I think most people wanted a sort of box to box goal scoring eight and a right winger more so, and appeared that there were funds. And I think the lack of using two and two and getting four was the frustration. And simultaneously, it always makes it a bit worse when you see other people strengthening around you. But yeah, I'm not incredibly disappointed because like it's football, and all of that. You have to consider the priorities in life. But yeah, I would have liked to add one thing. I do think the sort of backlog of injuries we have currently does make it a bit more paramount and a bit more manic, the reaction that we didn't bring anyone in. And I do think it's compounded by the fact that we have such eye-watering or salivating lineup of games immediately. And the idea is that we bring someone in and they would immediately hit the ground running, which I think if someone did come in today, they'd be under insane amount of pressure, especially as a right winger, and they didn't immediately Rabona flick like Greg Taylor at Parkhead and then score a bicycle kick sort of thing. But yeah, I think it's frustrating, but I don't think it's the end of the world. I do think the fact that there was no further outgoings, substantial ones. Obviously, I do agree with Dave and you that the board and the recruitment team have done well to sort of get rid of quite a lot of players. Yeah, the fact that at least Kamara didn't leave, we didn't have that as another opening. But yeah, I don't think it's been the perfect window. I do think if you were to take in stock at people's reactions prior to UCL qualification and post, I think you probably get people saying the window was an 8 out of 10 before, and now 6 out of 10. Whether that be reactionary and merited is a discussion for in its entirety, because just because we have more funds, we need to spend it. But yeah, I don't think it's great, and I think it's ended quite sourly. And I think as much as the transfer window is a game of getting players in, it's also a game of appeasing fans. And with the release of the Champions League packages at exorbitant prices, I'd say undefensible prices personally, especially considering the external factors and the life we're all living currently, and the sort of hubris to expect that people are not going to want something in return. I know we're Rangers fans, we get to watch them every week, but we are fans, not customers. And it does appear lately that we're being treated like customers if we want to extend back for the entirety of 2022. So I think it's probably at a low point, and I think they can do their best to improve the sort of chemistry between the board and the fans. But yeah, through the transfers, they haven't done so. But if they want to get some clout back with fans, I hope they announce a Morales and Kent contract extension, because that will be the sort of juncture defining discourse for the next few months.
Yeah, I think especially the Kent contract, that was something I felt the club might announce today to try and take a wee bit of heat off them. But I can totally understand where you're coming from there. I think a lot of fans are disillusioned with the club right now, especially when the Champions League prices. It's difficult to justify that, to be honest, and the fans are rightly having a poor opinion on that. There was a couple of things you mentioned there that I wanted to pick up on. You spoke about where we maybe could have strengthened regarding centre midfield, right wing. And you also spoke about the kind of injury record that we have right now. And I think you made a good point there, Patrick. I think that is bringing a wee bit of anxiety towards the fans. I don't think the anxiety would be the same if we had a fully fit squad rearing to go. I think that is just something that we need to deal with. David, based on what Patrick said there, I'm interested, of course, basically just the same question to you. How do you feel about the lack of activity, and where would you have liked to have seen Rangers, go for a real statement signing? What area of the pitch would you like to have seen addressed?
Um, it's quite a tough one. You look around social media, for example, I think just about every single position has been quoted as, needing upgraded. I think me personally, I don't think we've had a bad window. Some of the players we've bought in are obvious quality. Some of them it's going to take a little bit longer, but again, I suspect there's quality there. I think Patrick was bang on what he said about the ticketing price. I think that kind of built a rod up for the board almost. It was this whole, well, if you want us to be successful, you need to pay premium prices. Well, that's okay, but where are we seeing the reciprocal side of that? Where are these players that are going to make us successful? And I think that is probably what's kind of annoyed people. 5 years of right wing, say no more. There you go. That's Stephen in the comments. I think right wing's a bit of a tough one for me after talking about Matondo, because I think if you buy him and then in the same window you buy in someone to replace him in essence, that is going to destroy the guy's confidence. And that's going to be, we sit here, we all love the club, so it's easy for us to talk about it. But as a player playing in front of 50,000 people, I don't know how you come back from that. It's quite clear you're not seen as first choice. Yeah, potentially down the line you've got places to change that, but certainly that rules you out in the near future. I think my personal preference, if I'm being totally honest with you, I'd have liked to seen a good goalkeeper come in. And even if it was potentially, again, as Patrick said, part potential with room to grow with the team, I'm not knocking McLaughlin. I think McLaughlin has done fine on the whole so far. But McGregor can't get another year after this year, surely. McLaughlin, he's not that far behind, let's be honest here. McCrory, I like the guy's distribution. I think it's a marked improvement on either of the other two when he's going long. I'm not so sure how he plays with the ball at his feet, because we didn't really see much of that in the 2 games that he played. I do get the feeling that he's not seen as the answer within Ibrox. I think we would be seeing more of him potentially if he was, if he was seen as competent. Do you give McGregor another year? Probably not. So I feel like McCrory's kind of going to become Andy Firth, for want of a better term. He's going to be thereabouts, but he's not really going to do much for us. So we're actually going to have to replace that position anyway. And I think there was a guy, and Patrick, you'll know way more about this than me, especially as you say with your Turkish football, but there was a Turkish keeper we were linked with that supposedly was quite a hot prospect. Didn't come to fruition, obviously, but something like that would have been a good one for me, where we can get him in, he gets that bit of time to settle while McLaughlin takes most of the games, and then hopefully sets us up for years to come, or at least until we sell him on and make a decent profit out of him, as we've said before. So yeah, goalkeeper for me actually, despite everyone talking about, right wing, centre mid, centre back, number nines. Yeah, I would have gone with goalkeeper.
I don't think you're alone in that opinion, to be honest with you. I think a lot of people aren't convinced fully by John McLaughlin yet. I think he's been good since he came in, but I can feel the anxiety around Ibrox sometimes when John McLaughlin's got the ball at his feet, and that sometimes doesn't help. Although he's handled it well so far, but I don't necessarily disagree with your opinion. To be honest, I think we do need a long-term first-team goalkeeper, and that is something that I would imagine the board are looking at. Probably just something we couldn't get done this window, but we haven't done. Ultimately, it looks like for a lot of the fans, we haven't addressed a lot this window.
Let's just refresh Twitter. Anyone got any rumours in the comments? Something. Keep us going.
We'll kind of finish up. There was one last question before I've got one question for the two of you, to be honest, but we've got one last question I wanted to ask you about, Patrick, was the kind of approach to our transfer window here at the end. It looks like the board have been unwilling to go in, maybe take a risk. But we do always hear from a lot of Rangers fans that we need to give youth an opportunity. I hear constantly about Charlie McCann. This boy needs to get a chance. He needs to get a chance. Well, unfortunately, it looks like the pathway for him is blocked right now. Does this give the likes of King, Lowry, Charlie McCann, and Devine, does this give them more opportunities in the first team? Is that maybe the approach that the board are taking? We're going to really focus on youth now and try and give them a pathway into this first team?
Yeah, I think no doubt. I do find it trouble when the idea of incoming transfers and blooding in youth are presented as a dichotomy. Like you can't, then they're mutually exclusive. Like you can't have one without the other. I don't think across the board all of them will see extensive minutes, though I do think obviously Leon King will play a significant part. He's featured twice in the Premiership, and he was trusted when we went down to 9 men to come on against Hibs, which I think show a lot of trust between the coaching staff and him. I think Alex Lowry, it was absolutely terrible for his development to get that injury during preseason, which both put him back in his first team place.
It's a shocker,
and now,
by the way.
Oh no, but it's two injuries now because he had one in preseason when he was training or before Portugal, so he wasn't able to team up with the first team in the training, which obviously would have prohibited his inclusion in long-term plans in the first team. And then with that, he had to go and rehab with the second team, and he was playing fantastic. And then he got that what looked like a coward's tackle. I know there's been a lot about it, but it was wholly unnecessary considering circumstances of the game. And in fact, it doesn't really matter when that tackles made. It's just the absolute shocker. And not the greatest guy it came from either. As much as he tried to excuse it on Twitter, but we're all wants to talk. But yeah, I do think there's some potential. I think the idea that none of them have been loaned out is a bit of sort of leveraging risk. I think it's quite, there is always that sort of, and I know Rangers admire Man City's sort of strategies in so far as in-house development and keep the players training. And there's a good argument for it because far too long have we sent players to the lower reaches of the Scottish game, and it's just we've failed them pretty much. Though I do think someone like Charlie McCann, he's evidently talented, but we do have a sort of stash of midfielders there. Whether you want to comment on their quality, that's fine. Some of them aren't great, but I think Charlie McCann specifically should have been loaned out to somewhere in the EFL pyramid or a fellow Premiership club if that's palatable. I know some people don't like the idea of strengthening our rivals, but again, we always have that clause where they can't play against us. So if you were to send him out to a Hearts or someone along those lines, I think that would have done well for his benefit. But obviously, I'm not paid to sort of judge the best decisions for his benefit and his development. But yeah, the others, I think King has a clear role as a sort of fifth choice centre back, and I hope to see him play a bit. Hopefully, see him prominently feature in the cups. I think Lowry will play a role. I'm not sure what it will be coming in for preseason. I was bullish on what he was going to do. I thought he'd absorb quite a lot of Aribo's minutes and maybe a bit of Arfield's, but that's obviously been sort of catapulted and put on the back seat because of his injury. Devine, I think, will play a role as so far as when Tav doesn't want to play, and that seems very rare. But he seems fine, and I don't think he's ready at this step to assume a first team position in anywhere that's merit of his value sort of thing. Like he could probably go to the lower reaches of the championship and start, but that's probably not going to do as good for his development as playing and training with the first team. So his pathway, I think, is best suited that he's going to play as the understudy as to have. But yeah, I think I'm happy that the board haven't sort of come out here and sort of used this sort of line of youth that we're going to trust them, because that'll be weaponizing these young
Yeah.
players and putting a sort of large sort of marker on their back. And it's like, oh, you're not good enough. Why didn't we go sign Evander? But we wanted to play Charlie McCann. And that would have added even more pressure onto them. If that's an in-house sort of idea and they've made that clear, then good. That hasn't, so that they know it, but it hasn't sort of been used as a line officially outside of house. But yeah, I'm excited and I hope we see a bit of it, because I think a successful, functional, and sustainable club both sort of exercises a player trading model, but also develops in-house talents, and we have a good class, it seems.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you made some great points there. It was interesting what you picked on about the club looking at Manchester City's approach, and they would probably argue that they got it right with Nathan Patterson, and they decided to keep hold of him. And look where he is now. He's absolutely flying for everyone after a bit of a difficult start. But I also agree with what you say when it comes to Charlie McCann. Charlie McCann is 20. He didn't necessarily come through our academy. I think we signed him for Manchester United a couple of years ago. So he is slightly different. And I have to agree with you. He is someone I would have liked to have seen make a move on loan, just because I think we can all see this boy's quality. Every time he comes into the team, he looks ready. He looks ready to play. Maybe kind of similar to Stephen Kelly. And look where Stephen Kelly is now. Obviously, it's a fantastic move from him. I wish him all the best at Livingston. But I think there was real aspirations that he could make it at Rangers, and it just ultimately hasn't happened. But okay, we're
Ross,
yeah, no, on you go.
Just to add to that, it's I think it was Gavin in the group is always talking about. I think when it comes to loans, it's so important where they go. So, we mentioned about potentially sending them to a rival. Now, I don't have a problem with our players going to rivals. They can play against them, hopefully help take some points off them. As was mentioned, there's always a clause they can't play for us. But I suppose the real question is what does going to a team of hammer throwers, if you want to use that term, so let's say we send them to a Motherwell that just try and beat people basically. That doesn't teach them anything about playing with us. It's not going to be representative of the challenges they're going to face in our team. Yes, it'll get them used to playing games regularly on a schedule. That part's great, but actual tactics and how the teams play are totally different. So I think, yeah, I'd like to see McCann go out, but I think I'd actually be a bit different. I'd like to see him go overseas somewhere if he was going to go out. Somewhere that's a bit more technical than perhaps, a championship side in Scotland or even a lower premiership side in Scotland. Something that continues to develop his ability, preferably, to be blunt, and it's not easy to find, obviously, and Rangers have far more qualified people than me to do it, but, preferably somewhere where there is a pressure to win as well. Because, some of these teams, it's pretty much skating about for draws a lot of the time, just trying to pick up points here and there. These guys need to get used to the fact that at Rangers, try as we may, talk about youth as we may, it is all about winning. And I suppose, just to finish off my point, that's the only thing that worries me about the youth being that backstop this year, is knowing, and sorry to anyone offended by this, but our fan base can be very unforgiving with mistakes, and quick to get on people's backs. And again, with these guys being youths, we start doing that, as Patrick alluded to in his bit. It can very quickly go downhill. You're putting a target on their back. They're suddenly the reason that we're playing poorly. That's an unfair pressure to put, and to be honest, it could ruin their chances with us.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think we have to be honest. Sometimes we do put a lot of pressure on young players, and
Yeah.
that is just something that playing for Rangers you have to get used to. But you also make a great point there about the mentality. It's not necessarily where you're going to play in terms of the actual football style or the tactical aspect. It's all about going somewhere that's going to fit the mentality to come back to Rangers and make an impact. So yeah, that's a fantastic point. And I know that Rangers they're obviously trying to build their affiliate links. Maybe that's something they can get eventually once they get that club back to the level we believe we should be. Maybe we have an affiliate link that we can continuously send players on loan to, and they get that development. That's hopefully something that we can have in the future.
It's the team that Chelsea used to send all their loan players to.
That's it.
That's it. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like
So
regular, wasn't
something.
it?
that's obviously the dream, isn't it? Yeah,
Yeah.
obviously Manchester City have the City group, and they have so many different clubs, and they can just pick. And listen, it works for them. It's a good model.
Yeah, it is.
So yeah, well, I'm conscious of time. It's been a really good chat. I've enjoyed this. I have one last question for you both, because I like this one, because you've got to think in the spot, right? So I want you to take everything into consideration. I'll come to you first, Dave. What would you rate Rangers transfer window out of 10?
6.
Okay, fair. Patrick, you gave me this idea earlier because that was the way that you were
So
kind
it's
of
your
ranked
fault,
it.
Patrick.
You went
Thanks.
between 6 and 8. How would you rank the transfer window out of 10 for Rangers?
Yeah, I'll give myself a decimal point. 7.2.
Nice, I like that. I like that.
How did you get to the point 2, Patrick?
Yeah, no, because it couldn't be above 7.5, because I think when you go above 7.5, that's good,
Yeah.
spanning into like excellent territory. But I think it needs to be clear of anything 6, because that's too close to 5. And I think everyone has a different determining, but it's
Yeah.
above average. I think our outgoings definitely carry quite significantly. I think the incomings are better than fine. Like, it was a decent incomings, but the outgoings and the ability to sell both high value and shift on low value is quite good, I think.
Got 3 in the comments.
Yeah, we've got 3 in the comments, which is that's what it's all about.
I felt bad
I guess
saying 6 when Patrick said 7.2. That's all
no,
right.
the emotions of the night, I guess, will
Yeah.
create some sort of reaction. I think it's always, when you judge transfers, you need to judge them when they're signed with everything you know about them.
Yeah.
I think we're at this really awkward juncture to rate players, because they've been in here for a month. They might have played like 200 minutes of football. So I think you probably have to wait until maybe not January. I personally, for statistical stuff, like to wait till a player plays 1,000 minutes. So I think maybe we give it till the World Cup actual, like when that happens. I think that's a fair juncture to start beginning to make evaluations. But I think any number right now, you can justify it based on that. You can say it's a 3, and he could make a really good argument for why it is a 3, and I could maybe, like, we could all agree, because I think it is just so dynamic right now. But I think we'll start to see a consensus when we actually play some games, and hopefully win some football games.
Yep.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I always like those kind of questions, because everyone
Ross,
evaluates it differently.
no. Come on.
Okay, I'll give you mine. I'm trying to take the emotion out of it. Okay, so I would probably be somewhere near Patrick. I'd probably give it around a 7. I think the club they have done quite well this window. I think we have brought in some good players, and a lot of them are making an impact now.
Yeah.
So I'm going to give them a 7. Could they have done better? Absolutely, but I'm not going to be too critical. I'll try and take the emotion out of it. But yeah, I think we'll finish up there. That's been a really good chat. I really appreciate it. Thanks for coming on, the 2 of you. I hope you've enjoyed it. That was obviously my first time hosting, so hopefully that wasn't too bad, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for everyone getting involved.
Bad for a Celtic fan.
Yeah, well, don't say that too loud.
I know.
He's just joking, by the way, I promise. Yeah, thanks for everyone getting involved in the comments. I've seen lots of comments, so obviously tried to pick out as many as possible. It's been really good. Thanks for the engagement. It's been great. You can obviously find us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. And remember, we have the Friday Bulletin tomorrow at 7 p.m. and we'll have the Sunday podcast on at 8 p.m. And obviously that'll be digesting everything that comes out of the Old Firm game. So let's hope we win it. Yeah, exactly. So let's hope we win at the weekend. And yeah, thanks for listening. Thanks for commenting, guys. Cheers.